Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jedi's Lighthouse. This is an improv class that Jackie and I came up with for the 2020 Virtual Jedi Gathering. That was a great weekend, and this is the last day of it. You guys didn't show up to Discord if you had the opportunity, so we decided we were going to do it on our own. All right, Jackie, we're going to talk about pendulums. Kind of wish we had a couple other people in here, like Connor and Gabe. But I think that between the two of us, we have enough information. This is just basically us talking about it, our experiences, what we've learned. We're not professionals.
Right. Far from it. However, I think that's what makes it such a good tool, right, is you don't need a ton of training to find a pendulum useful. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of tools in the Jedi path that are just in the world, right? And I've found most of them are very difficult for me to use. But that doesn't mean that just because I find this easy, that it's going to be easy for everyone. So how about a big old disclaimer that says, hey, if you're struggling with this, it's okay. Like, there are 1,000,001 tools in the world because everyone's a little bit different. So I've only been using a pendulum for a couple weeks now. I took a class, actually it's been almost a month now. I took a class from someone, and it was super simple, and I found it worked really well, which was the surprising part. And because it's so simple, I think it's good for us to be able to teach in this format. And I'll go into more detail about kind of what I do and everything too, but kind of be curious just a kind of brief rundown of what you've been doing, Allie.
So I've been doing mine for a few years. I'm all self-taught, well, mostly self-taught. The first time that I was introduced to a pendulum was in Texas, 2008, right after I'd gotten back from Iraq. I went on this, like, tour around, like, I call it a tour around the United States to meet Jedi and one Sith. So I was in Austin, and I was with Callista, for anybody that's old guard and knows who they are, Callista and Tyrion. And they were, I had lost a card, my debit card. I had lost my driver's license, my military ID, gone.
Ooh.
So we were trying to figure out what had happened to it, because I was like freaking out. That's my military ID. I was stationed in Hawaii. I can't just drive to Hawaii. I need some way of getting on the plane. So we ended up, it was funny, we were doing the pendulum thing. We had a map, and every time on the map, it showed where my car was. In a parking lot, everything. We were using the map specifically. And we would move, like we would go to a completely different area, and still on the map, it would show where my car was. And I thought, this is crazy. It says it's in my car. I've looked in my car. We looked in that car several times over. It was not in the car. It was not in the car.
Right.
So we went to go and get me a new military ID, report that it was missing. And then I had to just go to a bank every time I needed cash. Actually, well, no, because there wasn't a bank. There wasn't a SunTrust where I was. So when I got up to a certain place, I had checks on me, and I gave a check of like $1,000 to a Jedi, and I said, I have no other way, but I promise you this won't bounce. I can show you where in my account, because I had the internet up on my computer. I was like, I can show you in my account. I have the money. I promise you it won't bounce. So I had to get $1,000 out of someone else's bank account. It was just crazy. Well, so anyways, I had gone to the car right before I left. And the reason I had to do that is because I had to cancel the card. I went to the car before I left to get on the plane, and it was underneath the driver's seat.
Ugh.
We had looked there several times over. Like, I looked there 5 times. Callista looked under there at least twice. Tyrion 3 times, Tyrion's brother like 4 times. None of us saw it there. That's why I said it was in the car.
Right.
And it was in the car. I was like, what the
heck? Yeah.
It flabbergasted me, but the pendulum knew every time it's in the car. And I just couldn't wrap my head around that. So I get to, so that was my first introduction to it. 2 Jedi introduced it to me because I was frantically looking for something and I couldn't find it.
Totally fair.
So ever since then, I started experimenting with it on my own. I would look up information online. Obviously, I knew meditation was a key part of it, and I developed it in a way that I could use it for accessing my subconscious and my intuition. On occasion, I will experiment with it, and I have had success, surprising success, at finding people. I found it the first time I used it for that. I found an apprentice who we had lost. He'd gone somewhere outside, and it took us directly to him. Like, took us out of the store that we were in, said, you're going to have to go outside and find him because that's where he is. And I had only known this guy for a few days. So I wouldn't have known he's going to be an outdoorsy, like outside the PF person. Actually, it might have been the commissary. And then I used it again in Japan to find my sister. One of the times I could easily just say it was probably intuition because she had mentioned to me that she was going to the bathroom, but I wasn't listening.
Right.
Because I was absorbed into trying to find a CD by Perfume, which is like a Japanese techno group. And I didn't hear her say that, and it led me to her. And then there was a time when I was out in the middle of Japan and I didn't know where she was, and it led me to her. I mean, yeah, granted, she's my sister. Maybe I could have figured that out, but she had never been to Japan either. So just because it led me to her on a strip that we were in a foreign area that I don't really know that much about, first time I'd ever been to Tokyo, So it was really interesting, and then we did it at a gathering. We did it at a gathering where I had everybody, we were going to test it to see if we could find somebody. I had my husband and a friend of ours named Stacy. Some people know who Stacy is. They went off somewhere, got behind some trees, but was sitting down at a table, and it was large parking lot out in the middle of the Smoky Mountains. I told them, hey, there's somewhere around here. I don't know. Let's see if you can use a pendulum to locate them. I did it first. I found them first while everybody else was moving towards a different direction. We never figured out quite why every single person's pendulum took them this particular other direction. We have some theories. There were a few people who had gone off on a hike, and we think maybe they were looking for them instead of my husband. But 2 other people did find my husband. Gabe's biggest thing was he was trying to follow the crowd, and he didn't want to go with what his intuition was. And when he finally found him, he's like, I should have just gone with my intuition.
Yep.
And then his apprentice, the person who would later on, either she was his apprentice at the time or she became his apprentice just right after that. They're from Chicago Jedi both. She found my husband next, and those were the only 2 aside from me that did. And you could say, well, that's probably because your energy is very much aligned with your husband's. But the fact that these 2 other people who don't have that same connection found him, that shows that there is some, at least anecdotal evidence that it could work. Now, am I going to tell you that you should substitute this for, say, something like legitimate search and rescue techniques? No, I am not going to tell you that. Though if it's like a couple of years later and you want to try it because you're trying to find like a body that you probably know is dead, just don't put any hopes up for the person who's grieving. Please don't do that.
Right.
And go look on your own and see if it works. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's something to experiment with as long as you're not doing it in a way that will damage somebody else.
Right.
Or possibly put somebody in danger. And and I would not tell anybody to ever rely on it, even if it does work every single time.
Right? Yeah, totally fair.
Overcome recklessness.
Right, there you go. See? It all works. Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, and I'm sure I'll have to start doing that as well, and kind of play around with it. Because the way I was taught was kind of the very traditional, just asking yes or no questions and stuff. So, but there's so many things you can do with it. And even, like you mentioned using a map, you can do the same thing, even just asking yes and no questions, right? Just start narrowing it down. Like, is it in this city? Is it in this house? Is it in this room? And you can kind of, so I'll have to start playing with that because we lose stuff constantly. You cannot have a house full of ADHD people and not lose stuff.
I should mention that. I actually have used them to find, like, my keys before. Or I've used it to find, like, to find other pendulums. I have a few of them, and if I didn't know where I put them, I can access my subconscious to tell me, where did you put that? And I can find it.
Yeah. Well, and as I mentioned in the chat room, so I'm just grabbing this in my head, right? All you need is something that can swing freely, right? So, and a necklace or anything, right? You just grab it, and you can ask questions. It may not be as clear or accurate, but especially if you lost your pendulum, that might actually help you find your pendulum, right? Or if you're not even sure, you could just find something that's kind of special to you, and because you want an energetic connection to it. It will work better the more that connection is there between you and the tool. So let's say if you wanted to show your pendulum before kind of dive into this part. So is that quartz, straight up quartz? And then sodalite on the bottom?
Quartz.
Rose quartz? Okay, the color doesn't come through very well.
Yeah, that one's rose quartz, and this one, I think it's sodalite. But honestly,
it looks like it would be, as long as it's blue. Yeah, that looks like it's sodalite, because like lapis lazuli is usually a lot darker, and it doesn't have as much white in it. So, and sodalite's pretty common. So,
yeah, so I'm pretty sure it is. I just went, and this just kind of shows you how easy it is to make these. I literally went to Michael's before the show, and I grabbed up like $11 worth of material, a nice chain. If you're going to use a chain, I would say get one that's got the smaller, but not too small, because they can break easily. But the kind of smaller ones, I don't know if anybody can tell just how small that is, but very small.
It's really visible.
The smaller ones, because it makes it swing easier. The bigger ones, it gets all weird, and then the really thin ones, cord works like yours. You have one that uses a cord.
Mine is actually kind of a mix, because I didn't want to wrap, wrapping this stone in particular would have been difficult with wire. It's a little hard to tell, but it's kind of like it's three-faceted. And it's a mix of mica, which is very fragile and flakes off really easily, and then there's some granite in it. And so the granite wouldn't care, but the mica itself is pretty fragile, which also sucks though, because then I don't like to carry it around very much, because it just doesn't handle that very well.
So you just need you need something that's actually going to like you instead of the last pendulum you had.
Right, the one that just keeps running away from me. And actually I have another stone that I just haven't had the time to wrap yet. But also even just the elements, the metaphysical properties of both granite and mica are conducive to communication with higher realms. So it's actually pretty handy. I just went and found really cool rocks that I liked along the big Thompson River, which is up here in Colorado, and absolutely beautiful. And then, so what's cool is, that means it's absorbed the energies of the mountains and also the river, and the energy of the Rockies is really quite nice. So what I did to make this is I Googled how to wrap stones with hemp, because I had hemp, and it's really easy. I mean, this is my first attempt. It's not awesome, but it was fine. Like, it wasn't that complicated. And then I wanted a little more stiffness, so this is beaters, like jewelry making wire. And I already had the like crimps and stuff from making jewelry myself. And then what I did is these stones on top all have purposes as well to increase communication. There's moonstone, labradorite, what is this one? I don't remember, but it's online somewhere. I can always answer people later too. So it's not citrine. It's calcite. It's yellow calcite. Onyx. What are you? I know what you are. One of my favorites. This one that starts with an R. I mean, like, because there's a couple of them. I don't think it's anyway. So I picked some stones, partly because I wanted a little more weight on it as well, and it looks cool, and I like it. And I put a little loop on the end because there are some times where it's like I want to make sure, like, if I needed to, I could put a finger through it just for extra stability. Yeah. I didn't know if I'd need it. I was experimenting. I usually don't even use it. I just grasp between these two fingers. When I did a necklace the first time, yeah, I just kind of wrapped it around and just made a nice simple point. Like, it doesn't have to be crazy long. It's all really, it doesn't have to be fancy. You can buy fancy and you can buy pretty, and if that resonates with you, cool. And if you have the money for it, cool. Kind of poor. And I like this stuff better anyway.
Somewhere packed around, I literally have a $300 worth pendulum that I have a nice. Actually, okay, so technically it may be worth more, but I got the stone for $300. In Japan, actually, the same time when I was going around with my sister, I saw this and I was like, "That's a Peruvian opal. Opals are my favorite."
Oh, yeah.
They resonate so well with me that like almost all of my pendulums are opals. Like
well, I mean,
and then the opal. So I sat there and I'm like, I really want this, and she goes, "You're not gonna buy it. You're not gonna buy it." And so we go to like a Lipton's restaurant, and I was mulling over it, and she goes, "You're not gonna buy it." And I said, "You know what?" And I got up, I said, "You stay here," and I walked down to the store, and I said, "I am buying that stone."
Nice.
And I took a picture of and sent it to my mom, who does gemstones and whatnot. I was like, "Check out what I got. It was like $300. She goes, "I think they forgot to put a 0 on there."
Right. Opals are ridiculously expensive, but they're amazing. They're so beautiful, and yeah, they're lovely. And if you get a chance to go to New Zealand, they have some amazing opals down there that you can just drool over in the stores. So, maybe not buy, but you can drool over them. You know. Yeah, they're very cool. So yeah, I would say, you know, and for some people, like, stones and gems are not going to be their thing. So you just need something that's got some weight to it, right? So that it can move more easily. It just makes reading it more easily, or more easy.
It also makes it easier if it has a point. So like the picture that we use to do this in Discord, it's a metal piece and it's kind of swirly, but it's got a point at the end.
Yep.
And those can be super helpful. In fact, when I did the gathering with Pendulums about 2 years ago, 2018, I took, they had these little glass bulbs that you can buy at like a Hobby Lobby or whatever, and I put little stones. Like the little Eddie Bill ones. I took whatever stones I wanted, put them in there, and then squeezed some resin in there to make sure that everything stuck, and put it on a chain. And then it was actually interesting how I did this one. I didn't know who was going to participate, and I only had gotten so many. So I had them set out on a picnic table under cups or in boxes, and they had to go and run their hands along to see what they would pick, if they would pick one. And then some of them got empty, and some of them got one. And it was really interesting to see how it all worked. Actually, one of our shadow members, she had come out. Her name's Raven. She runs the shadow aspect of Force Academy. It's been there for a while. She came out for a singular day to say hi. She took the 2 Sith that were with us and went out on a hike. That's actually who everybody thinks they might have been trying to find. Because they were the ones that had gone on a hike. So she said, or she didn't get one, or she said that she wasn't going to look at it. And Miles, who was a Sith at the time, got one. He picked one up, and when they were out on the walk, he blessed it, and he gave it to her. So it passed hands from a light aspect who was the one that created it and put her own energy into it.
Right.
Went to a Sith who later blessed it and passed it on to a Shadow Master.
That's really cool. Yeah. That's really neat. Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I think we could probably get into how to actually use a pendulum kind of in detail, since people know how to make one and have some ideas of kind of how we've used it already. So, like you mentioned, do you do like a really short meditation when you're in the middle of something?
I do. I can do it while I'm standing. I can do it while I'm sitting down. Mostly I do it when I'm standing because it's easier for me to ground out my energy that way.
Yeah, that's fair.
The energy of standing up is more than sitting down when you want to get antsy and go. But when you're standing, I don't know, it just takes more effort, I guess.
No, yeah. Everyone's a little different with grounding anyway. So, yeah, that's a really good point, right? Like, and so the way I was taught to, honestly, most of the time I just sit down at this point and just grab it and then go, oh, that's right, I should do something. Because I'm like, I just want to get into it because I'll have an idea. So this is going to be a little more in-depth, but it'll give people ideas as well as kind of how they want to do it. So yeah, taking a few cleansing breaths and trying to clear your mind a little bit just to let things settle, right? That's huge. It doesn't have to be long. If you want it to be long, cool. If it means you're building a meditation practice, even better. And then my teacher does a pretty cool and unique invocation, and I've been using it personally because it works enough with my belief structure. But I'll say this really quick so people can hear it, and then I'll give a couple other. I'll also mention, like, you could do a prayer if that's in your belief structure. You could do an MBO, which is something that I teach at IJRS, which is request a most benevolent outcome. So, like, for instance, I would say I request a most benevolent outcome for clear reception to my questions and, whatever. And I'll go into some other things to include in that. Or you could just verbalize your intentions. Be like, I'm trying to get some answers today. I would like a clearer connection as possible. It's okay. It's the intention and the energy more than the words most of the time, but the words do matter. So I'll say, so the invocation that my teacher uses, and she uses this before she does any energy work. She says, I ask for guidance from the universal spirit creator. She could substitute force here. My angels and my spirit guides, substitute whatever you want there, to move from soul to subconscious, from subconscious to conscious being to higher self. I request protected conduit from the realm of the highest good, aligned only to light, so that I may raise my vibration for the good of all beings to step back and truly see and be. In gratitude, humility, grace, and love, I only accept vibrations of 500 or above. So mote it be. And I can post this, and I'll share it with you. So, and basically, that works for her and her belief structure, right? And for me, it's fine. I'll tweak it probably over time. Basically, the big things to include is like, you want a clear connection. You want to go through these levels of consciousness and awareness, because you want to get to a higher level so that that's where you're going, right? I mean, like, energetically, it's a higher level. There's no judgment to it, though. You want protection, because you don't want to let not even, like, thinking of, like, the worst, like, oh, a demon and something evil. They're just tricksters out there, right? Like, you're doing this for a reason, and you want to feel like you can trust it. And so this is all part of setting up your trusting energetic space so that you have as little doubt as possible.
Yeah, and I want to bounce back off of that. You mentioned the demons and tricksters and whatnot. Well, Christianity is probably the one that's going to have the most
struggle.
Resistance. Yeah, the most resistance and struggle with this, because we're taught so many different things and we misunderstand stuff. Well, I dive really deep into the discussion of, like, demonology and whatnot, and I have a book out that I did, and I haven't even seen if I've actually gotten so many hits on it. But It's called An Evil and Adulterous Generation. It's something that I don't tell a lot of Jedi about, but I mean, whatever. I'm very open about my understanding of different things. So if you have a question and you read the book, just ask me. It's much more complicated than what I have in there, because it looks like I'm just completely against anything that's metaphysical from it. But hopefully this will give you an idea that there are things within Christianity that allow you to do whatever. So anyways, the Bible talks about using lots, casting lots to get answers. So at first it was these two different stones called, oh shoot, I know the name. I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, go for it.
I can't believe I can't think of the name.
Happens all the time, right?
I know, right? Stones in Bible used by Levites. No, not those stones. It's like the sacred breast stones. I'm like, no, not those. The other ones. It's something like one means light. It's on the tip of my tongue. The Urim and Thummim.
Okay.
Urim and Thummim. So this was something back during First Temple time frame. They had a stone. One of them meant light. I don't remember if it was the Urim or the Thummim, but you would, and it's actually three stones. It's three stones. So the theory is that the other two, if it was Thummim or Urim, were black and white. And what you would do is you would reach into the breast, behind the breastplate, so that you couldn't see what you're getting.
Right.
You pull out one of the stones, one of the two stones, and then you would pull out the other one, which was, I guess, in another thing, so that you would know that it was actually that one. And if the one that's called light shines, and this is the theory, they're not really sure, but they're saying that this is the theory. If the light shines, then the answer in the other hand is affirmed by God. So it's not just left up to chance. You actually know. Well, they lost that. At some point in time, they lost the Urim and the Thummim, and so we don't have them anymore anywhere. I think one of the theories is that one of the prophets hid it away with the Ark of the Covenant or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
But it's lost. No one can find them anymore. But as a result, later on you see, and you can see it in the Old Testament, which some people might say, oh, that's Old Testament, but I'll get to the reason why you can affirm it in the New Testament. You see where the people on the boat that Jonah's in, and they're casting lots to figure out who it was that was causing the storm to come, and it casts upon Jonah, and he's like, okay, yeah, it's my fault because I didn't listen to God, and I don't listen to Nineveh. And then they're like, okay, well, we don't know what to do with you because you're doing this. Obviously, we can't do anything against your God because he's kind of, well, he's that God.
Yeah.
You know? So he's like, just throw me overboard, right? Well, it was lots that found them. God communicated through the lots.
Mm-hmm.
And they believed that God was communicating through those lots. Now, that was what was the first thing that was interesting. But what I found more interesting was I was researching how different popes were chosen over time. And you get the whole, these people were apostles, and there are a couple that are considered apostles. And this is how they get that every pope was an apostle or is an apostle, and you don't have to actually know God in order to be, or Christ in order to be one.
Right.
So they were affirming Matthias and somebody else. They were like, okay, God, there's two here. you tell us which one you want to take. I guess it was Judas's role, Judas Iscariot. And they cast the lots, and it landed on Matthias. This was God in the New Testament affirming lots. That can be anything. This could act like a lot. It's basically just a yes or no coin toss thing. It's all the same. But in their case, they had to pray to God and say, hey, we want your answer. We don't want ours. That's why we're giving this to you. So you tell us what you want. And the good thing about this is even though there's a yes and no, I have had this be basically still. If it's not doing like a big thing like this or going like that, and I'm trying to get a yes or no, like a definitive yes or no, and it's just kind of just sitting there.
Right.
Then this is I'm not going to answer you.
Yeah.
So
it's totally an answer.
Yeah. So there is biblical evidence that supports this, and you have to trust that that's what that is. It doesn't have to be a demon. You can say, if you want to make sure that it's only God coming through, or even if you don't, and I know lots of Christians are going to be like all freaked out when I say this if I hear it. If you aren't Christian and you worship another God, but you want that specific God to be the only one to answer, you can say, if any other answers, you can please go and do something to them and let them know they're not allowed. So that you have that faith, that personal faith that the answer you're getting, whether it's a no answer or a definitive answer, is just that.
Yeah.
And you can also
that actually,
it's just yourself instead of any outside source.
And that's the thing, that's the last real key step for setting up this energetic space is you have to trust, you set aside your doubts. That's super hard some days, I get it. And then you have to trust yourself, trust that you aren't purposely trying to manipulate it, and trust your connection. Now, even if your connection is not 100%, any connection is something that you're building and growing. And so it's worth doing it even when you're like, I don't know how good my reception is today. That's fine. Do it anyway. And if you're kind of doubting, that doubt actually might be you telling yourself that you're not receiving well. And you can always ask, should I ask this again? And on another day, right? Not immediately, but on another day. So that gets you set up. So the next step, and I would think probably most people only need to do this the first time. Unless things are being weird, you might want to ask. And I call it calibrating the pendulum. I don't know if everyone calls it that, but it's fine. So basically you hold your pendulum, and it can move a little bit even while you're just chilling, right? But if you're not sure and you're like, wow, it's being disruptive, whatever, it's moving too much and you don't want it to move, if you just kind of lift it up and set it back down, it will usually settle a lot better. And then ask your pendulum, say, show me what your yes is. And then it may take a little bit. I'll see if I can show it on here. Mine's moving reasonably well. There are times when it barely moves, and I'm like, can you please be louder? And the stronger your connection with your pendulum, usually the better it moves. And then you can either wait. You can wait for it to settle, you can lift it up to settle it, or you can just ask and then watch how it adjusts, but then say, okay, show me your no. So yeses are usually forwards and back. Nos are usually left and right. Can depend, okay? And then today, actually, I asked this because I forgot to ask this question recently, but ask it to show you when, so I say, show me ask differently, because sometimes our wording is just not good. And for me, my pendulum goes from my left back, right forward. If that makes sense? So towards the right.
Yeah, I've never even thought to ask that question. That's a good one.
I just did it now. I mean, honestly, it was today. I was like, oh, okay. And then the other one you can say is ask it to show you I can't answer you. And so for me, then that goes from right back to left front with that one. Because there are things we're not allowed to know. It's not in your best interest to know it. or you're asking for a bad reason, so you can't know, or you're asking about someone else, and it's just none of your dang business. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's okay. You can ask questions about other people, but recognize that there are things you're not allowed to know. And so having these four things.
I would say for Jedi, if you're going to ask questions about other people, it should be limited to things like, are they okay?
Right.
But yeah, you're right. There are things that we just don't need to know. Like, I wouldn't ask for questions about their future. Like, are they going to get married, and is it going to be to this guy?
Right.
Like, don't do that, because as Jedi, we're supposed to be living in the moment anyway. Now, there are some things where we just need our souls to settle, and so we would ask questions like about our own personal future. Am I going to get through this? Do I need to make a different career choice because I'm just? And some of those answers may not be from something outside.
Right.
They could be specifically internal to you, and that's something that you need. That would, if you know the difference, if you are. I believe that if you set it up specifically, okay, I just want to know what I want, not what the universe wants from me. That way I know that I need to work on something in me, or maybe I do need to just make this decision. I wouldn't ask questions like, should I move out to, or should I, what would be something? You're given an opportunity to go and fly out to Australia or something like that, right? And then you're like, well, I'm just going to leave it up to chance. Should I go to Australia? You know,
but you can. So here's the thing.
I'm just saying that, you should, I wouldn't leave it up to chance like that. I would think that at that point in time, you really need to center your own self and come to those kinds of conclusions on your own, because that's very important for your own growth. If you're leaving everything up to chance, then you become a very superstitious type of person, which may or may not be good for your image and may not be good for your psyche.
Yes, except that as long as you're connected, you're not leaving it up to chance. It is different, so as long as you are connected, it doesn't matter whether you're getting where the information is coming from, as long as you set it up properly. And actually, the next point I have listed down here actually is about asking questions. So might as well kind of dive into that too. The first thing, you want to get used to it, right? Like, you have to build up some rapport, right? Like, you have to get kind of used to it and see how it feels and see how it acts. And so, did it kind of glitch out a little bit? Sorry. So start with, it happens. So I'd say, one, start with simple stuff. Start with yes and no questions, which can be surprisingly hard to come up with. I don't know why, but like, I'm so used to asking kind of more open questions that coming up with yes and no questions to ask can be really hard at first. But the other thing is, don't start with just pointless questions. And especially like questions you already know the answer to. It kind of treat the moment with a little bit of respect, and treat the energy and the process with some respect, and don't just ask some ridiculous questions like, where was I born? Or like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, the questions, you already know the answer, so it's not actually building any real trust anyway.
It's not a polygraph.
Right. You don't need to calibrate questions like that. Like, yes and no, even if you don't ask any other questions, you've got the basics. Cool. Ask real questions, though. And that can be interesting and tricky to get used to, but I would say take a little bit of time to find those times, right? Those questions. And I'm even trying to remember like some of the questions I asked the other day. Sorry, Melody Camden, get out. 5-year-olds. I'm like, you're not allowed in here.
I saw her trying to hide behind you.
I know. I'm like, no, kid. Okay. And so, like, it actually, like, took me quite a while to come up with some good questions. Initially, I was just asking actually about like guides, and since in this first class it involved some archangels and stuff, I was like, okay, we had 4 beings show up, and I asked each one of them in turn, are you part of my team? And just got a yes or no for each one of them, and I just wrote it down. So I was like, okay, cool. Not sure what I'm doing with this information yet, but I learned something interesting, you know, that day. And so, but what I did, and this is where I'm going to say don't do this, is I then went looking for charts so that I could try to get like names and stuff like that, right? So I downloaded an alphabet. Yeah, no, it wasn't a straight up Ouija board, but like that, right? Like I'll find mine. But basically, there's all these different types of charts you can make. And so there are number charts. Number charts are pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So you can use number charts for asking either about numbers, right? Like yesterday I was asking some pretty detailed questions, and I asked straight up numbers. I was also asking for like decades, and I was asking about percentages. So when you're I do that with a different chart.
Okay.
I have a blank one that I can fill in, and okay. I do that for different things sometimes. But like percentages are really helpful because we have most things, especially if you're asking about the future, is a probability. And so you can say, what is the probability of such and such happening, right? And that could be also really handy with a number chart. And that's not too advanced to get into because there's enough space between each of the lines. Mm-hmm. So you want to be able to like be really clear about, okay, which one is it going towards? And, you know, that's harder to do with a letter chart. And so I had downloaded one. It wasn't this one. This one is different. So the one I downloaded was in alphabetical order, and this one is in a very unique and interesting order that I don't know what it's about, but like it starts with Z, and like it's not in even reverse alphabetical order. So I'll put that back up again. And so
nope, I'm looking at my keyboard and it doesn't make sense.
No, what I suspect it has to do with prevalence of letters, but I don't know. Like I said, and I haven't tried doing this new version of it because all of these, there's so many letters, right? They're so close together that it's harder to differentiate. So until you're confident, I wouldn't mess around with asking questions that require letters or spelling things out. I would say get creative, find a way to ask, like narrow it down and do yes or no answers. But there are blank charts, or you can make your own, right? And just fill in the blanks, give yourself plenty of space if you're trying to decide between maybe 3 things or something. And try that. But the yes and no questions definitely help a lot. And so, like, for instance, yesterday, now these are going to be some kind of out there questions because those were the things that were on my mind. But for instance, I was asking, like, I asked some questions that didn't work well, and that's okay. But so I asked, like, what percentage of my lives have been lived in the future versus the past, relative to this time frame? And I received that about 20% of my lives have been in the future relative to 2020. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I asked about, like, I used the number chart actually to ask about, like, being like a young, medium, or old soul, and then what quadrant of that level. So basically you can just use that to kind of refine. I used the number chart to ask about a prior life, where I know about it because I'd had an Akashic record reading, and I knew that I had some number of children in that lifetime that I had to raise by myself for a while. So I was like, I didn't learn how many in that reading, so I was like, why don't I ask? And I learned I had 5 kids in that lifetime. Like, that's a lot of kids. But not really, because then I also used the numbers to narrow down decades. And I learned that I met my spouse then in the 1920s, and that she died in what looks like to be like the 1950s. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I asked about my past life with my current spouse. And I was like, cool, because I had a reading about that. And I was like, okay, were we together in World War II? And I got a yes. Sweet. I'm like, were we gay lovers because we were soldiers? They're like, yes. I'm like, all right, cool. Interesting random info, you know, like, so you can start asking questions. And note, the decades one, I said, okay, first I had to narrow it down to a, like, 100-year span, right? Was it the 1800s or the 1900s? And then I started narrowing down decades. Here's where it got weird. I tried to find out when I died in that life, and it would not give me a clear answer at all. And so I was like, oh, am I not supposed to ask about this? And it was, yeah, like, it's just not information I'm allowed to know for some weird reason, and you just have to accept it, you know, like, so that was interesting. So you can ask about all sorts of stuff like that. I also actually asked about our daughter, and asked if she was one of the 5 kids from that past lifetime. She was not. And so then I asked about something else that's deeply personal and I'm not allowed to share it. But yeah, so that gives a few other kind of just bits of information that for me was interesting. Some other things that I've asked about, even like sometimes I have trouble making decisions because for whatever reason, right? But I'm like, it's just there isn't a clear path, especially with my day job. There's just like 5 different tasks and I don't know which is most important. And so I can actually, I put them in on a blank chart and go, okay, which would be most beneficial to work on right now? Or you could do the same thing where if you're like torn between what you think you should do and what you want to do, right? You could put that down and ask, and have the pendulum help you sort that out. Because usually the things you should do are not the things you actually are supposed to be doing. It's what you've been kind of guilted into doing, and it's someone else's idea of what's right for you. Right. And so that's where I like bringing the pendulums in, because it can help separate out that external noise and help you clarify. Right. And, you know, even if you're thinking, well, it's given me all the answers that I wanted to hear, it could be, right? You could be manipulating it. When I feel like that might be happening, I try to be extra still, take another couple deep breaths, and remind myself of what the intentions are. But also, sometimes it's because we know, right? We already knew it. We just didn't accept it until we had this external validation to what we already had intuitively figured out.
Yep.
And that can be incredibly valuable.
So we've been talking about how it can be used for like answers and questions, like even trying to locate somebody is a question. But there are other uses for pendulums. Like you can use them for chakra healing and balancing. I don't know a lot about it because I don't really work with that kind of energy healing. I'm more of a ceremonial and ritual person. But you can take a pendulum. So what I do know is that, like, I've taken a pendulum before, and I've cleansed a space using it by just kind of, it's kind of like disrupting the energy that's there, and then calibrating it back. Hey, yeah, maybe, well, not quite feng shui. No, it's really the same thing. I don't really know what you could relate it to, but you just walk around in the circle and you have it there. It's like something that I have if I want a quick space. I have a pendulum with me, but I don't have my normal materials. Like I usually use salt and water if I'm going to cleanse the space. But if I don't have that, I can use my own energy. And so one of the reasons why I have a stone like this, you can see the top, and then at the bottom there's also a point. And then it goes down towards this one. So I could have done it 2 different points at the same time, but I thought the solidite, the one that I had, didn't have that. This is because it directs your energy from your hand directly down the line. So directly down the line into this, and it helps to allow your own energy to be directed specifically into the points that you need, so that you're not like doing a massive cleanse everything out. Because there are some spirits that if you're like, sometimes if I'm doing it, I'm also trying to cleanse my own energy, So that when I enter the space, I'm also cleansed. But if I'm doing that, my energy may repel spirits that are around the area that are healthy for the environment. And I don't want to do that. So I just need my small little space cleansed for me. That way I can sit down and I can meditate on whatever it is that I need to meditate on.
Yeah. And I know, actually, that was in the classes I was taking. I just couldn't make that class, how to use it for like cleansing and things like that. But it's also cool, just, you know, I think especially when people are earlier in their journey, and that's a very loaded term. It doesn't actually mean anything, because I've been doing this for a long time, but there's still a lot of things I'm pretty early with, right? Like, and there, you know, so if you're like, I'm not sure that I'm sensing anything, or I know things are off, but I don't know what to do with it, like, you can start asking even, like, should I meditate right now, or should I take a nap? Like, you know, sometimes we think we know the most effective way to rebalance ourselves, and there actually might be as simple as you just need sleep, or maybe you just need to go play, or, you know, like, so being able to just have a tool that way it's not you in your head, because you're not in your head, and actually it's really hard to stay in your head when you're having to watch something external to yourself. So I think, especially for people who are more logic brains like me, like, it could be extra helpful that way. And you can also experiment with it, because I've noticed, like, I can do it right now. So let me see if I can stand and do this. I don't think it'll be super visible, but so when I move, I can feel it pulling back. I should probably get a little more. I can feel it pulling back towards, like, chakras. So, like, I could feel it pulling this way, and, like, back this way then, right? So, like, just experimenting with the different ways to feel the energy through it, it actually goes a long way towards the doubt, too, because if you're not feeling anything, you're like, well, how do I know my hands aren't just very, very subtly moving and making this direction that I want, versus there are times when I've definitely felt it. And even, like, when it was really cool, today's Monday, so yesterday when I was getting it set, like, to do the reading, like, it's amazing, like, it's truly phenomenal to me that I can, like, feel it tugging, like, kind of towards the center, or I can feel it, you know, even if it's taking a little bit of time to center, like, to settle into an answer, I can feel it pulling that way, and I know that's not coming from me. And so it's a really cool way to work on increasing your sensitivity to energy as well, and kind of play around with all sorts of stuff.
This is actually a really good point to make. Someone who was like, oh, why are you going to teach this class, earlier today on another Jedi board. He's, a skeptic. He said, I just use a coin toss to figure out what my subconscious wants. Well, here's the problem with using that as your particular lot. We are already programmed to understand that statistically you can toss that up and it's going to go 50-50 either way. So when you know that and you see the answer, it diminishes whatever was influencing that to make it turn one way or the other. So when you have this is a lot harder to have a 50-50. It can go in whatever direction it wants. Now it's all knotted.
That is the tricky part.
Right? I've had that happen so often with me because I don't use string with mine. Mm-hmm. I always use chains.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why string likes to fray a lot more with me, and it's easier to break. So at least the metal, it doesn't. But that's just me. It doesn't work the same with everybody.
Yeah.
I think that just doesn't like me.
That's also why I use wire too, is because chains do like to get kind of caught up. Well, the other benefit too is, when you are repeatedly using the same thing, that connection gets stronger and stronger. It's going to be hard to do that with a coin or things like that. Though that can still be used that way. In that, if you'll know from even like a 50-50 chance, you can flip the coin, and you can actually feel in your body most of the time if that feels like the right answer. So if it's truly just you trying to make a decision, and if the coin toss comes out wrong, you'll know, and you go, oh, cool, well, actually, that did tell me the answer, and I'm not beholden to the coin's answer, right? Like, there are different ways to use it, but...
Some people, I think that works, but for me specifically, and a lot of other people I know, it doesn't work that way because they believe it's too much chance and statistics.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that if they feel like they wanted a particular answer, they're like, well, maybe I really didn't. And they really second guess themselves. And then they go with the other option. It turns out that option was the one they really wanted. So that is the problem with using something so studied, I guess is a good word. So studied that it's ingrained into the culture. And that's why I prefer the pendulums.
Yeah. And it kind of brings back to, like, you know, there's so many different types of tools, and you don't have to pick any one particular one. But it is good to try them out. And I'll say I did try using pendulums, like, randomly over the past probably 30 years at this point. And it wasn't until recently that it really clicked. And so if it doesn't work now, it might in the future. There's nothing that says stuff never works forever.
It might also be the stones that you use.
Yeah, and where I just was. And so right now, the way energetically the world is, everything is raising in vibration a little bit. So everything energetically is a little more accessible than it has been in the past. So even if someone was watching this and like, I tried it before, it really sucked, you're a different person now.
Yeah.
Try again. Like, and like I said, you don't have to get anything fancy. Just look around your house and just play with it. You know, it could be really fun. I mean, it may not be as cool looking as it looks like on like shows like Charmed and stuff where they're doing things, but it also might. I mean, when my teacher does it, like, her pendulum moves wildly. Like, it is huge, but she's been working with the same one for years and years and years. Like, she's works on this stuff all the time. And, you know, I'm sometimes going, be louder, you know? I'm like, be more obvious.
I should say that's another one. You had mentioned let it tell you. Sometimes it's like most of the time, especially if it's a new one, I'm like, look, I get that maybe you have your own answers, but I really need you to work with me. Can you show me you'll work with me? And I'll give it its, you know, this is your yes. This is your no. And, you know, this is your, I'm not going to answer you.
Right.
So, telling it what you want, so that, because it's better for your memory. For my memory just sucks.
Right.
And it's just like, please just work with me. But you have to be thankful, appreciative, kind when you do it, and not the compassion part. You know, like what Connor was going through. I don't know. Were you in that class? Connor?
No, I missed just watch it. Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so it's really good. He was talking about 5 C's that you use for like meditation, and the third C is compassion. And he's talking, and that is useful even in all energy work. And as long as you show compassion in all of your energy work and all of the things that you do, and you come to it, it'll know that you're genuine and you're not just trying to be like, you're gonna do this or I'm going to crush you, or not that it'd be that easy to crush a stone.
Right.
Unless you have a hammer, but it's just like, you don't want the spirit of whatever's in the stone to run away from you. You want it to work with you.
Well, and it's a co-creation. Like, you should come with some humility and respect, not making yourself smaller, but the humility of recognizing that as humans, we understand such a tiny, small percentage of what's the real in the universe, that we need to have some humility about that And if you're using a tool, you're already acknowledging that you don't know something. So there's zero benefit to try to, like, bully the tool into what you want. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. And I will say, even with, like, you know, when I gave those things, like asking what the Pendulum's answers are, I will say I use this to communicate with my non-physical friends. And I was just asking her some questions, and I asked if she was something like, are you around me, or whatever, like, are you with me? And instead of a yes, even though that's a yes or no question, the pendulum spun. And I let it settle for a little bit in my brain, right? Like, kind of like sat with it for a little bit. I'm like, are you saying that you're always around me? And then it switched to yes. So there are ways, right? Like, trust your intuition, trust your knowing. You can get more information than just the yes and no, right? And there were times when yeah, like, even before I asked what maybe looks like, you know, I was like, oh, does that mean maybe? And you can just ask, right? You can clarify. And because, you know, my friend is very playful, and I was asking her about a very silly little thing that came through by way of a basically spam message on Facebook. I was like, was that you? I'm like, really? But it was funny. And so, like, you know, like, I tend to come into things too seriously anyway. And so, like, allowing, like, myself to be open to even having a little more playful responses coming through the pendulum, because that's how she could communicate with me most easily that morning, made sense. And it was like, oh, that was really fun. And so you may even find it's the pendulum isn't changing, it's the source of the information that's changing. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, like, go with it. And there, I don't know.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of that, just because that Christian side of me is trying to speak out, you have to do it in accordance with your own belief system. If you're, so for example, if you're Christian, that first line in the Bible, thou shalt have no other gods before me, there's other lines in the Bible that say, you know, aren't you supposed to seek your God? If you're working with other spirits, then that, and as a Christian or as a Jew or even, I'm going to say Islam, yeah. Because there are some sects that believe in jinn, and maybe they communicate with them because some of them are good, and it's complicated. But I'll say most of Islam. Then you're going to diminish that connection with God. So whatever it is that your specific deity asks you to do, if it's like, you don't get to, if you're, I don't know, what's a good one? Your gods are Japanese. You don't get to work at all with the Egyptian belief system. No. Actually, that's not really a good one. We'll say Russian.
Well, I would say,
so you have to be respectful towards whatever that tradition is. Otherwise, you're going to have other things that come through that probably you could upset your own deity if you do that. And that can bring its own problems. So be assured or rest or know specifically what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. In your case, you're not Christian. You're allowed to do it all day long. So
well, and I would say,
I'm not condemning you. I hope you know that.
No. What I would say is ask the questions. Ask the questions, because ultimately what matters is your own connection to spirit. And so...
Well, no, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you shouldn't be working with familiar spirits. That's what you're working with would be classed in Christianity as a familiar spirit. And even if you ask the question, you need to direct it specifically to God to get the answer. Whether he sends an angel to give you that answer or he gives you the answer himself, that's on him. You don't need to, as a Christian, you don't need to be working with anything that's outside of the Christian modality.
Totally different topic in the end, ultimately. I would say just set the intentions that you need to, right? And I would say as long as the intention is pure and you're doing your best, you should get decent quality answers. If you feel like you're not, that's a good time, though, to start looking at what are you doing? Is there some sort of conflict with your own belief structure, right? Like I wouldn't, the way I would have approached this 30 years ago is very different than the way I would approach it now. My belief systems are significantly different. Right. So I think if you start to feel like maybe something's off, that's a good time to start going, okay, wait, well, one, did you skip the steps, right? Did you skip setting that intention, clearing yourself, and asking for a clear connection to whatever you are trying to connect to? And you don't have to be specific. This invocation is just to the highest realm and the highest good.
Right.
So for Christians, that automatically is the same thing as God.
Yeah.
Right? There's no difference there. And using the terminology that makes sense for you as well would be the same thing. And so I wouldn't even worry about it a whole lot. I would just put it out there because I don't know what I'm connecting to the 99% of the time. With asking my friend, I specifically knew I was asking for her to be around and to answer. At the same time, I knew it was always possible that she might not be available. Not on that day. I was pretty dang sure she was going to be available. But even if she wasn't, I'm open to, if someone wants to pass along a message for her or for a different guide or whoever, I'm cool with that. As long as, again, all of those conditions I've set up in the opening are met. So I don't worry about it because all of that was set up and I'm trusting the process. So, and I think that works for whatever religion someone is working through, or, if they just want to call everything the Force, totally cool. Nothing wrong with that. I would say then, have your wording be that it's of the highest light or something. Whatever, you know what I mean? That's where it's kind of play with it and see what seems to help the most. If you want to sit down and actively do an active shielding meditation first, cool. Whatever makes you feel confident, safe enough to be open to higher communication is all good. And if you are having trouble, please reach out. Because
we're both available.
There might be something going on and you might not know what is happening. With someone else can help you and get that cleared up for you. And it may be you may think, oh, isn't that a sign that I shouldn't be doing stuff? It might actually be if someone is watching this and someone tries the pendulum and then they discover something about themselves that they need help with, that's your intuition leading you there. Mm-hmm. It's not a failure. If something doesn't go the way you expect it, that doesn't mean you screwed it up or that anything is wrong. It means you were led in the direction to get that addressed. So any way that weird things come up, whatever, ask, reach out. There are quite a few people who are pretty knowledgeable in the Jedi community. And if you have someone in your personal life that's pretty knowledgeable, cool. Go with what feels right. You can ask the pendulum that. Might not be the best time, but you can try, right? And then I would always say, you have a lot more power we all have way more power than we're ever taught. So don't feel like you are the weak one there.
I want to say one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
You said we have a lot of knowledgeable people in the Jedi community. You and I know a lot of these people, but they're not public because they're scared to talk. I want to encourage you guys. This community allows you to talk. I know, when we go to offline gatherings, a lot of these people don't know about Gabe being a shaman. They have no idea. Most of these people probably have no idea that in the past, if they read my book, I met an angel and I was terrified of it. A lot of people don't know that. Actually, it's only something I've recently come to terms with telling anybody about. And that's why I joined the Jedi community after that incident. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of things that we're all connected to, and it is difficult to talk about it in the Jedi community because we do have people that are skeptics. But honestly, we need to kind of be like the LGBT community. I mean, really,
yes,
you guys are
put it out there.
And for anyone that does not know, Jackie is LGBT. That's why I'm pointing at her.
Right.
And your community gets out there and talks about, like, the problems that need to happen. And without that in the world, you guys wouldn't have gotten hardly any rights at all. And honestly, that's what we need in the community. We need to take a page out of y'all's book and get out there and start speaking more. You have a platform, whether it's here on the Jedi's Lighthouse, International Jedi Federation will talk as long as you're not doing anything dangerous. And we have people that are trained well enough to recognize that's a dangerous, like, energy healing technique. That's a dangerous technique that you're teaching. We're not going to let you teach anything dangerous, but for the most part, most people don't. They're still learning. They're still sharing with each other. And we want you to know this space is open.
Yeah. And just, try to be aware that you don't want to be talking about these deeply personal or confusing or whatever, moments with people who are highly skeptical. It's only going to be harmful to you. Because there are definitely Jedi communities that don't work with energies and stuff like that.
Yeah. They're very skeptical of it, and they see it more as a metaphor than it is an actual metaphysical thing that you can access.
Right. And so I was saying, but Institute for Jedi Realist Studies does not do that. We are actively working with the Force from the beginning. And at the same time, though, there's never any pressure. It's, I struggle constantly. I do not easily tap into this stuff. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. And that doesn't mean that you can't find tools to make it easier. It just means that everyone's journey is a little bit different. And, even in intention, our journeys can be very different. But, in the end, as long as people are coming with a good intention, right? Like, that they want to do some good in the world. I mean, you're going to find a spot in this community, and who knows where it'll lead, because it's totally, you never know. I mean, in 18 plus years now, I still don't know where it's going to lead. I know where I want it to lead, but it certainly has not gotten there yet. So we'll see, Yeah,
definitely.
So, well, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to cover. I would say the thing to remember is the more you practice, the clearer your connection's going to be, And if you're not digging the one you found, get something else and play around with it. You can reach out. The two of us are both around different places, and I'm sure.
I'm everywhere. I really am.
Yeah, pretty much. And and while we're still newer in many ways to this, we don't know everything, obviously. I bet we could probably start asking around and find some other experts. But either way, a tool is meant for you, and we could teach you the basics, but...
Hey, we're NCOs of the Jedi community, man.
Right. Pretty much. So, yeah. So hopefully hopefully people found this beneficial. It would be really cool if people have made any of their own pendulums or picked some up, share some pictures and stuff, whether this is on YouTube or on this, on our various Jedi sites, share your experiences, share your questions, we'll do our best to answer them and maybe find some different resources if necessary. But, in the end, a tool needs to be used. So find something, play with it, see what comes of it. Don't get discouraged if you get weird answers, and, it's okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us here at the Jedi's Lighthouse. I really had a lot of fun talking with Jackie. I think this is probably the longest we've been able to talk face-to-face, sort of,
right?
Face-to-face. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad. And my cough is killing me. Unlike Knights of Awakening, which some of you may know me from there, I don't have a cool tagline for this platform yet, but hopefully we'll see you again at the Jedi's Lighthouse. Bye.
Bye.